Tesla's shareholder meeting yesterday was an epic milestone with 75% of retail shareholders voting 75% in favor of Elon Musk's 2025 CEO Performance Award. Bigger and better than most of us were expecting, Cybercab production is starting sooner than we all thought, now slated for April. And of course, the massive news that Tesla intends to build a chip fabrication facility. Elon called it a TeraFab that will build 1 billion chips per year. Everything, it seems, is much bigger than originally planned. Elon also talked about a 10 million Optimus production line at Giga, Texas in a few years. We have Phil Beisel with us today. Phil used to work at Rivian and Apple. Thank you so much, Phil.
Yeah, wow, yesterday, wow, wow.
Well, tell me what you thought was wow. I mentioned a few, of course, what is it called? The TeraFab?
Yeah,
Tell me what you think about that one. That seems out of the blue, and that seems to be one of the biggest news.
yeah, it's crazy for someone to say that they want to create a chip fab, right? I mean, it's the massive, massive capital, big build. I think Elon feels like he's a little bit pinched, right? He's talking about chip production that I don't really have a back of the napkin at the moment in front of me, but something greater than the number of chips output by NVIDIA by far, because these are edge devices, consumer devices, and if you add up two per Optimus, two per vehicle, you add up all his potential edge inference ideas, stuff he's talked about, Starlink edge inference, et cetera. I think the guy's got chips on the brain because I think he sees it as like kind of a linchpin, like it's the thing, and it's also the thing that might be extremely constrained, and it's not like he can go easily buy it if he can't get it done through TSMC or Samsung. If they can't produce it, they can't produce it. So, I mean, I think he's talking about plans that are out 5 years on that front. And I think he's a bit negotiating out loud too. I think he's saying, you guys got to put up for me, or I have to do this. That's why I think in the same sentence, he mentioned Intel too, right? But it's really awesome because the signal through that, beyond whether he's going to actually do it, is that he sees the demand from the devices being, off the hook. And it's, wow. It's just like, wow. I mean, we knew this was coming, right? We knew we can do math. We can understand what the outputs of these different fabrications can be, chips per wafer. I don't know how many chips per wafer for an AI5, but we can just see that he's going to need a lot of these things. And, a lot like his brain, he's thinking a lot like iPhone a lot, not like a lot like NVIDIA data center a lot. So, yeah, that was a big one, I think.
I mean, you said that we kind of knew it was coming, but most people I talk to about this, they just, like I would say, would they ever create their own chip fabrication? And I said never, because it is tiny little margins, it is sterile rooms. But I think he's put his back against the wall, and it says, so that, like, I think what you said makes sense, right? Which is what you said makes sense, because what he's saying is that I need so much that no matter how much you make and you make and you make, Samsung, TSMC, Intel, it's just not enough, right?
Yeah, I mean, and he sees the demand on those companies from others as well, right? So he knows what they can possibly produce for him. I mean, I posted on that too. I said that don't be surprised if he goes vertical on the fab, and I was told I was an idiot too, which I am. But the point is that in answering your very question, by the way, he was talking about, like, you asked him how he thought, and he was talking a little bit about the idea of, I have to do the things I have to do. In other words, he doesn't go vertically integrated on every aspect of every product. He just goes there where he feels that it creates product differentiation, and the need, it helps reduce, like, in other words, it reduces risks in his supply chain, or it increases margins, or something, generally product differentiation. And that's the beauty of it. I mean, it's like, you don't see him building door controllers for the vehicles. He's not doing that.
Right.
But he wants to build these chips because he realizes that there's such a central feature of these products, and there's no brain without the chip.
Yeah.
There's no brain without the chip.
Let's talk about the, I guess, what you've been covering for us so well in the last several months is FSD. I think, what was it? Your part nine, part 10.
Yeah, we're
Um,
part nine. We're up to part nine.
the reasoning, the capabilities. So,
Yeah.
did you get excited when you heard Elon say that he thinks supervised FSD, unsupervised FSD could come by the end of this year, which is 2 months away? He's not going to say that. Now, he's talking about 14.2, or did he say 14.3?
14. Let's call it 14.3.
14.3, which
Yeah.
should come before the end of this year. He thinks at that point you can text. Now, obviously, there's legalities, right? But anyways, tell me how you interpreted all that.
Well, I mean, I think he said out loud the thing that we've been saying out loud: autonomy is solved. Right? He said those words because he sees that, and as we've discussed on this show, and we've talked about several times, you know, his view of this is ahead of our view of this because
Mm.
he's seeing what's happening at Tesla, almost like he's almost got like a time machine. His view of FSD is 3 months ahead of ours because he can see the advancements that are coming. That's why when he spoke of, oh, the next version will be almost sentient, well, you have to ask yourself, what do you mean the next version will be almost sentient? How would you know? There is no next version. Of course, there's a next version. It's sitting there in the lab. It's getting the final wraps on its training and validation, and so he can see that. And I think regardless of whether he says you can text in the car, what he is basically saying is we at Tesla have solved autonomy. We are
Confident.
capable at level 5, and let the chips fall where they may. In other words, they'll be yeah. I mean, no
No pun
no pun back
intended.
to the yeah, no pun back to the previous conversation. But I mean, seriously, what I think he's saying is, okay, maybe I don't get regulatory approval to do this or that or the other thing, but I'm ready to go, or I'm very close to being. One of the things that I've talked about a lot, and I think it's important to point out, is that when Elon's talking about these types of things, he's talking about a principle that I call convergence. And what that basically means is that it isn't when he says the word is, we think of it as a present tense word, like is solved. But I think from a technology point of view, you have to think of it a little differently. You have to think of it as he sees it converging. It's kind of like the limit equation, and he sees it converging to the point of solution. Like there's nothing in the way to get that convergence. So even if he doesn't have 14.3 in his hand, he knows what the team, they have a roadmap. He knows what the team is doing for 14. In other words, they look at 14.2 and they said, what do we have to do? What's our plan? Oh, 14.3, we're going to add some more park to park features, meaning the last mile stuff, but we're also going to really hone in on let's say 10 different difficult use cases that they want to really fine tune and get right. Maybe it's school zones or whatever. It's funny because when you listen to people speak about this, they get a drop of a release and they say, oh, this version is worse than something, or and I kind of laugh at that because I see it saying, well, wait a minute, this is the worst version that they're going to release. Every version's going to be better. And most things that people are concerned about can be addressed in just one release. And then all of a sudden, those things are gone. They're just gone. And so from Elon, I think his mind, he's like, those things are gone. I don't see problems with school zones. I don't see problems because either he's seen them solved or he just knows that they're basically teed up on the next release. So yeah,
Yeah, I love that point. That's a good reminder. But yeah, so the thing to take away is you're saying is that 14.3 is, in his mind, autonomy solved. If you can say to somebody that at this point you can do text while driving, that means you have to feel like the safety level is already at the point that is obviously, enough that you can actually tell somebody, you can go ahead and text, you can sleep in
yeah,
the car.
yeah. I mean, it's pretty clear from my own experience. I've been driving the heck out of 14.14, and I've seen some little issues with it, but to me, 14.14 feels like the version that's much smarter than its parent version, but still in its adolescent phase, right? It feels like it's still a teenager, but ready to jump into adulthood. And then, like I said, much smarter than its parent version. So, 13 was a beautiful, smooth riding experience. Didn't deal with many of the the park to park issues. It was kind of good in the middle. It really wasn't super safe or super or hypersensitive to road conditions. And we see that's happening here. We see it kind of in 14. It's a little bit jittery still because it's got so much. It seems to me that the brain has expanded so much in terms of the model, the size of the model, and the nuance in the model. We've talked about that in previous shows about the fact that you know it is, while it is an end-to-end AI, it is a bunch of expert modules internally, and I'm sure that they figured out the weightings on them better. And last night I was using the version. I could see it uh, kind of hesitating around, kind of jumping forward a little bit around pedestrians. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, this is actually really good news because it sees them. It was very reactive to the intentionality of the person that was about. Like, what's interesting is it paused. The person was crossing the road, had left the road, but it saw the intentionality of that person coming back, and literally that person turned around and came the other way. And I didn't perceive that. It is one thing it's important to understand is this car through 360-degree vision is doing this at 36 times a second. There's no way that we could be hyper focused on one area in our field of view about something that's happening, but this car is going to see stuff way before us, and that's going to be a common experience. Oh, we didn't see that. The car slowed down. Why did the car slow down? Because it saw it. It saw it ahead. And it's also, its predictive models are frankly getting better than our brain's version of the same thing. So yeah, it's a great thing to see this product finally coming into its own and solving the problem in a quite a beautiful way. I mean, I think it's something that people need to appreciate is the beauty of the solution. The idea that you can take this Tesla, production Tesla that you could buy tomorrow, have it on the road. It looks fine. It looks good. The cameras don't stick out. There's no LiDAR appendages or other sensor appendages. And then you just compare that, and which I have. I mean, I've been in downtown San Francisco, looked at Waymos, and they do look a bit like science projects. And there's something to be said about the simplicity. And Elon is always focused on the idea that the best part is no part. Take things out until it gets painful, and then put them back in. And in this case, he forced his teams years ago to remove a lot of the sensor modalities. And to this point, they haven't put them back in. Guess what? They don't need them.
So Phil, just to clarify, I know that I think I already know the answer to this, but I just want you to just nail it in the head. If he's saying that you can get to unsupervised FSD with 14.3 in our current cars, which has hardware 4 in it, AI 4, that AI 4 is good for robotaxi. The Cybercab is going to be launching in April, they've said now. And so it likely will have AI 4, right?
Yeah, I suspect that's true. I think they've got a modular strategy with Cybercab in particular, in the sense that I think they have a board swap strategy in mind, that they'll move from 4 to 5 and upgrade the cars. But the reason that they're doing that, look, I think anybody in software always wants more compute and hardware. Software eats hardware. That's common. I'm a software guy. I always want more hardware, more hardware. You can do more, but can you solve a problem on the current hardware for? Yeah, I think so. I think it's so I think robotaxi will start to roll out in scale on hardware 4. What we'll be missing likely is some of that cool stuff I talked about in our last podcast about interactivity, where they start to bring in other AI models to start interfacing with the humans and stuff. And now we've got to, what you should think of as that they are tuning the hell out of the inference cycles. They want the inference cycles to equal the potential frame rate, 36 times a second, and they're hell bent on getting that. And that is not an easy thing. That is not like you throw the AI in the car and you walk away. Engineers are spending days and hours and evenings and nights and lots of time on chewing down getting that performance in there. And some of it is tricks of the trade within the AI stack itself, but some of it is just understanding every element as you move the data through it, call it like a pipeline. As you move the data from the sensor to the output, you're looking at every cycle on that chip, and you're making sure that you're moving that data most efficiently through memory, et cetera, to get it to compute. Right? You want to get it to compute. Your biggest problem is moving the data to the compute core. It's not really the compute core. You're probably not compute bound. You're probably IO bound. Like you're waiting on data more than you're waiting on the compute of that data. So I think that they will not be able to, for example, on AI4, lean into some other use cases where they're adding other AIs in that stack. Like if they're pulling in sort of like the Grok experience for the car, I think that's going to be very difficult to do, because now what you're doing is you're taking, essentially, if you think about it, FSD is a real-time process, right? It can't, you cannot add latencies that pull it away from the real time. It has to be real time because it is literally driving your car. It has to operate. So they can never pull back. They need great, it needs to be very, very homogeneous in terms of its cycles. They need to have very good sense that it's always going to reach the inference cycles that they want. Now, if they want to layer a new AI in there, they've got to split the cycles, right? They've got to get something's got to run on AI4. So I think really the net of this conversation is that AI4 and robotaxi are fine. They'll be off to the races with that. They desire AI5 to add the next level of experience into the car, and I think they will kind of move those things in place uh, behind the scenes, by board swap or whatever, as it comes to bear.
Okay, that's good. That's good to know, because I thought that you needed the last mile stuff. Like you need to be able to say to Grok, to the car, you'll say, "Hey, don't park here. Park there instead.
Yeah.
Don't park in the handicap, or go ahead and park in the handicap spot."
Yeah.
But you're saying that that may not be available until AI5.
Yeah, it's possible. Like I'm not watching what's going on inside the company, directly. I don't know how much room they've got. They the net of it is they need to guarantee the real-time nature of FSD above all. They need to prioritize the real-time nature of FSD above all other, what I'll call, ancillary stuff, right? And the stuff we're talking about in terms of user preference and interactivity of the vehicle. While it's important for the full experience, at some point, you can get away with some fixed settings in AI. In the What you'll see is, if you see that behavior, you'll see, oh, they'll put more fixed settings or opportunities of setting in the UI, and eventually, as they start to add in these voice interactivity, they'll subtract all that stuff. They'll get rid of all that garbage in the user interface, and just allow you to set the preferences in a very granular way with your car. So if there's a compromise, that's probably where it's going to lie. Yeah.
I don't know what you're going to do now, Phil. I think FSD part 10 might be your last one, because autonomy is solved. You now need to start talking about the bot. And last episode you did talk about how, all the reasons why the FSD created for robotaxi cars is transferable to the bot. But we've not heard Elon tell us anything new, except that the bot demo for hardware version 3, hardware Optimus 3, won't come until next quarter. So any idea of what is the functionality of this bot going to be? If it's a good thing you're porting it, but it's
Yeah.
going to be AI4. You know what I mean? Talk about AI4 on the bot, and what kind of functionality you're expecting.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is going to be tricky with the bot, because the bot, I think, when we talked last, I said one of the things about the bot is, I mean, one of the beautiful things, and people can go back and look at our podcast, as well as read number 8 article about unification of architecture. So I think the tee up for this conversation is that the architecture, the underlying AI architecture, and all the piece parts for the bot and the car are effectively the same thing. Okay, they're both vision-based AIs. They have slightly different sensor inputs. They have definitely different control outputs, but the heart, the interior, how they manage state, how they manage their the mixture of experts model, it's all the same thing. But what I think with the bot is the bot pushes us further. The bot pushes us to a great degree more skills, more nuanced little skills. So so the good news is in terms of inference, as one of the issues is you run through, let's say it's a billion parameter model or a 100 million parameter model. It doesn't really matter. If you run through that model as a uniform element, like you're just saying, okay, I want to go through the entire thing in one inference cycle, you use a certain amount of compute relative to the number of operations of the weights. Like, in other words, if you counted all the parameters of the model, those are the weights, you would say, okay, it's constant. But when you block it out to these little mixture of experts thingies, like modules inside that do things like we talked about the gate expert for FSD, where it kind of swaps out of its need to do the highway driving, and it focuses purely on the gate exchange, the gate opening. What's the hidden give back, the hidden give back to that is that you now dramatically cut out a lot of it because you're not activating the entire neural network. You're basically shuffling through one of these blocks. Now, if you think of these blocks as being more granular on Optimus, and Optimus is doing a particular skill, let's say it's cooking an omelet, for silly example, but it's cooking an omelet. It can kind of swap into those little sub skills, and they may be very, very granular. I mean, it may be so much that there's sort of a skill to how the pan is moved, or how, and all those little skills can really allow a lot of the neural network in that inference cycle to go dark. In other words, they if they shuffle the data properly, if they activate the network properly, they don't need to run all the parameters every inference cycle. So that's where this is where it's gonna come down to, is it's like, if you're trying to do this on AI4, so what's the beauty of AI5? AI5 is going to give them, let's call it 10x performance. In some cases, Elon's talking about 40x, but he's talking about certain operations that they've moved from software to silicon, right? Like the softmax operation he's talked about. Because what really needs to be said here, above all, is that the thing about these chips that they've designed, both in hardware 4 and then AI5 and 6 and 7 and so forth, is that these chips are designed to execute their software. Okay. And nothing is better than that marriage between hardware and software. It is not a horizontally applicable chip, like throwing just sort of your average NVIDIA, whether it's training or inference chip, at the problem where, NVIDIA, for it's not to take away from NVIDIA, they have amazing silicon, but they've had to put a lot of kitchen sinks in there. And a lot of that chip, if you took if you tried to put a Blackwell chip in the vehicle on the inference side, a huge amount of that chip would be underutilized, not touched, and beyond that, it would just be inefficient as a chip for operating that way. So what Tesla's doing is they've got the most efficient kind of software to hardware translation, right? That means the hardware doesn't spend its time or doesn't have wasted silicon. It's all about the solving the problem that they. And what's beautiful too is the way they're organized from an engineering perspective allows this possibility that effectively, while the chip design team is clearly separated from the software team because they're very, very different disciplines, they spend a lot of time talking. I mean, they are practically separated by domain, but not necessarily by space in the office. And so I think when Elon talks about chip design, I've got chips on my brain, he also means that the software people are right there. They're right there, and the software people are saying, well, this is what we do in software, and the chip people are responding with, okay, how do we make that faster and better? So I think that when it comes to Optimus, it will be a challenge. I mean, I think it'll be a huge challenge, but this is what they do, right? It will really push the idea of how much can they get out of that chip. And it isn't clear to me ultimately that Optimus reaches any level of outside Tesla volume until AI5 is on board. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. No, so that's reassuring to me because obviously we're stuck with AI4 for a long time. AI5 has been pushed back. But what you've just said here is that AI4 is much more capable. Certainly autonomy is solved. So we're not, you explained it, AI5 might bring you more interactivity. You can talk to it and you can tell it what to do, but that's okay. That's a nicer added level. And then the bot with AI4 coming out this year in 2026, it should still surprise us with what it's capable of doing because it'll just swap out the expert that's needed or whatever time it needs.
Right.
But we don't need to, AI5 will be the killer app. But so that's the killer. That's the most important thing for me. It's like AI4 is still going to be usable and useful, certainly for Tesla, and then to excite the world, right? In terms of bot capabilities.
I think the other thing that needs to be said is I don't think the timeline for AI5 is being pushed out because there's some manufacturing or design issue with the chip. What I think is that Elon wants more in that chip, or the team wants more in that chip, and they wouldn't be pushing that chip out if they thought that hardware 4 was not AI4 was not capable. That's the thing that I don't think is said loudly. I think they've said, wow, I mean, Elon kind of said it without saying it. He's like, oh, we do integer-based inference, blah, blah, blah. What he's basically saying is, uh, we're doing very, very fast operations on AI4 and we're getting what we want out of that chip. And I think he's saying there's more legs to that chip than we thought. And we can suffer that. I mean, he's got a view on all of this. If he wants to push, I think it's him and the team that's pulled back on AI5 and actually pushed it out a bit, because I think what they're saying is, look, while we're still in the wet clay phase of this thing, let's get a few more things in this chip that really, really make it fly. And that's probably what's happened here.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Phil. That was great.
Yeah.
I appreciated that. I wanted to talk to you, of course, about the chip TeraFab,
It's crazy.
the AI unsupervised FSD coming out in a couple months. What does that mean? And then AI4 and AI5. So that gives me a little bit more reassurance that AI4 can do it, where nobody should be worried about any plans being delayed with just AI4. And then your explanation of what features we might miss with AI4 in the car, but also what features we might miss in AI4 on the bot. I highly recommend folks check out Phil's X account at PBEISEL. He's got all these articles, 9 on how intelligent FSD is, how it works, and reasoning. Right. That was a great show we did last week.
It was awesome. That was fun.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Phil. See you, everybody.
All right. We'll see you. Bye-bye.
I've created a website that is the most comprehensive resource for the Tesla investor. Please check it out. Simply go to my website at herbertong.com.